Welcome to Faculty Insight, brought to you by Harvard Extension School in partnership with ThoughtCast. I'm Jenny Attia, and I'm speaking with Shelley Carson, an associate of Harvard University's Department of Psychology, a lecturer at Harvard Extension School, and also a blogger at the Huffington Post and Psychology Today. Shelley, one of your academic focuses is on the connection between psychopathology and creativity. And the term psychopathology sounds like a disease I don't want to catch. So first of all, what is it? And why is it connected to something as glamorous and sought after as creativity?
Well, psychopathology is actually the study of mental illness. So it comes from psycho, which means mind, and pathology, which means illness. And there has been a connection ever since the time of the Greeks between high levels of creativity and strange behavior and actions. So for instance, Plato suggested that poets, philosophers, and playwrights suffered from what he termed divine madness, which was a madness that was given to them by the gods, but madness nevertheless. And Aristotle suggested that there was a connection between poets and melancholia, which is what we call today depression.
So in general, creative people are going to be just less happy than the rest of us?
In general, they may have a greater risk for certain types of psychopathology than the rest of us. We're all creative, but it seems that there may be some underlying predispositions that are common to both creativity and certain types of psychopathology.
Now, if people who are creative have a tendency to be more depressed than the average person, I find that odd because happiness is often derived from being creative, from doing things that are valuable and challenging and have meaning.
So we have two different theories going on here. One is by the humanists, for instance, Abraham Maslow or Carl Rogers, who suggest that creativity is the highest pinnacle of self-actualization, and it's really part of positive mental health. On the other hand, we have some research that suggests that creative people may be at greater risk for certain types of mood disorders, in particular bipolar disorder. They also seem to have a greater rate of what's called psychosis proneness, which is sort of a pre-psychotic situation, and they have greater rates of alcoholism and drug abuse as well.
Shelley, I've read that writers are up to 10 times more likely to suffer from depression and to commit suicide. Why is that?
Well, there is a higher rate of suicide amongst especially certain types of writers, such as poets, for instance.
Female poets in particular.
Female poets. Well, in general, females are twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression as males are. So their rate is up to 25% as a lifetime risk, whereas for males it's around 12%.
So is it better to be a great artist and miserable, or a happy person and not terribly important?
I think the greatest thing you can do is to follow your creative propensities and take your chances on the mental illness. But I also would like to emphasize that most highly creative people do not have mental illness. So we're talking about a greater risk, but it keeps it below 50%.
If creative people are more likely to be depressed, do they have the ability to work while they're depressed, or do they have to wait until they feel better to get anything done?
Well, there's a lot of research that's been done on when in the cycle of depression, or if we're talking about bipolar illness, when in the cycle of bipolar illness people are their most creative. Kay Jamison has done some research on the correlation between creative productivity and mood. And what she's found is that when people's mood is on the rise, that's when they tend to be most creative. And that happens at two different times in a bipolar cycle. For instance, when you're on the way up from being a depressive episode to normalcy, and then again from normalcy into a hypomanic mood. And this correlates with greater creative productivity.
Apparently, Schumann did his composing when he was manic. Is great art possibly the result of a mental illness?
Well, again, people like Kay Jamison suggest suggests that there are certain symptoms that actually promote creativity. So for instance, if we look at symptoms of hypomania, sometimes people report greater mental clarity. They'll say, oh, I feel like the cobwebs have been removed from my mind. They also have a greater activation of associational networks, so that one idea leads to another, to another, to another. This is referred to as the flight of ideas. And if we think about creativity as being the ability to connect pieces of information together in novel and original ways, then having this hyperactivation of associational networks might improve one's ability to be creative.
Shelley Carson, you have a new book out. It's called Your Creative Brain: 7 Steps to Maximize Imagination, Productivity, and Innovation in Your Life. And the premise is, as far as I can tell, that everyone can become more creative. It's not just the province of the creative types if people practice the 7 steps, apply themselves.
Right. So when I first started studying creativity about 13 years ago, I agreed with the idea that there were creative people and then there were less creative people. Then there were the rest of us. And as I continued to study, I really changed my mind and realized that all of us have this wonderful creativity machine, our brains. And if we train it properly, we can all be highly creative. Well, we're basically built to be creative.
Shelley Carson, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me, Jenny.
You've been watching Faculty Insight, brought to you by Harvard Extension School in partnership with ThoughtCast. I'm Jenny Attia. Thanks for joining us.